24 hours running up to a small flare in mid-sized CME coming off the southern departing quadrant, bottom right. We'll review that in some detail, but first, the coronal hole stream enhancement in the solar wind took a while to kick in. Plasma speed is rising this morning, but the slow onset allowed geomagnetic conditions to buffer the impact thus far. The bigger story, of course, is a small C-class flare triggering a sizable plasma exodus from the corona. The wide effect you see rippling outward from the flare zone indicates the power of the CME. On stereo A, which looks from behind Earth's orbit, so Earth is off to the right side of its view, we can see the ferocity of that CME here in the early hours of today. SOHO will update in a few hours, and so will the Enlil spirals. Let's peek in on a major hurricane, Sam. Goes geocolor combined with the lightning overlay here. Gorgeous display as it crosses the Atlantic. Hopefully it's going to stay out there and avoid landfall. Also have a weather note from China. Middle of the mainland, a slow-moving heavy rain system literally slugged its way down a river valley and pushed the water to extreme levels. And amazingly, not one report of injury despite losing multiple large buildings. One more key visual up here is the Terra satellite, which began to run out of fuel last year, is dropping down in orbit in a semi-controlled fashion to be able to gather science data from its new lower orbit. It has been up there 20 years. Up next, we find a unique star. It's all by itself in the middle of nowhere on the color, temperature, luminosity diagram. Even while they can make a guess at it being a white dwarf, it's the weirdest of the weird at super cool temperatures and a very compact density. Up next, we're looking back at the Carrington event and revisiting the magnetic perturbations from it. They're seeing signs of preconditioning, and whether that's a previous CME, coronal hole stream, sector boundary interaction region, this is a key aspect to the biggest space weather worries. A 1-2 punch of significant space weather almost always defeats a single event of greater magnitude in terms of its geomagnetic effect. Folks, we've been going over the solar forcing of the Jovian atmosphere, and today we'll look at its greatest feature. In their new revelation, I have to wonder where the impetus was to use Jupiter to understand Earth back when they shared the auroral infrared forcing, which we just showed a moment ago and have been showing in the news. But let's pick up the pieces with the Great Red Spot. Folks, it had been shrinking, and it's one of the things we've identified along with the strange radio signals as the major changes of the solar system shift affecting Jupiter. But it's not just shrinking. Its vorticity is enhanced, and its fastest winds are getting faster. They make one error, at one point saying that the wind speeds have increased in the storm 8%, which is equivalent to 1.6 miles per hour increase if that was on Earth. But that's comparing Jupiter's greatest storm to Earth's average wind speed, which makes no sense. If you're looking at Earth's greatest storms for comparison, which makes about 1,000 times more sense, you go 8% up from about 200 miles per hour. That's a 16 mile per hour increase, or 10 times their stated amount in the paper and the article. But more importantly, of course, the shrinking of the Great Red Spot continues and the wind speed is increasing. While this is still in second place in terms of the Jupiter evidence of change, second behind the strange radio signals from the electrons caught in its magnetic field, it is a solid atmospheric signal that the other planets are changing just like the Earth is, and often to a much grander